Right, welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and kick it off. It's great that you're all able to join. It is my great pleasure today to kick off what is our best practices for Contact Trace Plus. It's specifically focused on 1.1 version. So for those of you who are familiar with our 1.0 version, kind of what we released in 2020, this and then kind of improved over time in 2021 as well. But it all kind of culminates in where we are today at 1.1. So there's a few features that are relatively new or were added in kind of the .1 version. Those are the ones I'm going to specifically talk about today because they are the more relevant ones given where we are right now with COVID and with the entitlement itself. So I'm going to be jumping into that today, kind of showing best practices, how we would, as Ready Education, recommend you use Contact Trace Plus to drive some of these specific use cases. Specifically, the ones we're going to be covering today are, as I go back into my screen share here, our vaccination and routine testing. So my name is Dimitri. I'm one of the product managers here at Ready Education. I've been with the company for one of the early employees. I've been here for about over 9 years now, and I've held various different positions. So some of you may have seen me wear several different hats, but today I'm really coming to you as someone who can help you and tell you a little bit more about what you should do to turn on things like vaccination and routine testing in the app if you are so inclined. We're going to go into some of the nitty gritty of what you need to do. I will show demos of the platform. I'll kind of click around and show live demos. And then there'll be chance for questions. You can always ask questions either through the chat, which is the chat button in your Zoom window, or the Q&A. I prefer the Q&A if you can, kind of post your questions in the Q&A, and it allows me to really pick and choose the questions and answer them. But feel free to post them wherever you like. I will be able to see them and answer them. So without further ado, we're going to hop into the first key piece, kind of a bit of a housekeeping. Really is, how does this session differ from the sessions we may have seen already around product training or some of our training sessions? So for those of you who are familiar, we have training sessions every month from our product team as well. If you're not familiar, you should check those out and reach out so that you can find out when they're happening. Those sessions really tell you about some of the new functionality we're building and that you can use in the platform. So that tells you everything you can do. Today's session is really specifically focused on 2 use cases, right? So not all the different features and all the things you can do, but 2 use cases, vaccination and testing. Second, instead of telling you all the ways you can do things, we will focus specifically on what we think you should do for these use cases. So yes, you can run vaccination in a few different ways on the platform, depending on your specific nuances from your workflows. But we have one that we think works for most of our clients and customers based on what we've seen, and we're going to propose that one today. You can always make changes. The software is yours to really configure as you see fit. But today we're telling you what we think you should focus on as a first step, at least. And then the last piece we're going to really hit here is what are some of the items you can use to orient yourself with the changes here, the new feature functionalities in these use cases, the documentation to help you walk through best practices, as well as how you can get us to help you do some of these things. So really, what are the next steps for you to turn on or activate these specific use cases in the platform? So unlike training, which covers everything and really is just what we've built, this is specifically vaccination and testing, how you would do it in the Ready platform. So with that, we're going to jump into our first use case. So our first use case is vaccination. The concept of being able to track your vaccinations on campus, understanding who's vaccinated, who's not, empowering students to show that pass, that vaccinated pass to others or stakeholders on campus so that it's easy to convey this information and track this information. So recently in our last product training, you would have seen that we created something called a campus pass. So you would have seen that in 1.0. It was a campus pass, but you couldn't change much about it. Now you can create your own campus passes and your own campus and your own case statuses. And then, so you can do a lot with that, but we're going to talk about how you use those 2 features today to build in a vaccinated workflow. And what it ultimately boils down to, and right after this, I'm going to jump into the Campus Cloud to show you, is a blue campus pass. So a brand new campus pass that you're going to create, which will have the color blue. It'll be linked to the vaccinated case status so that when someone gets a certain status for their case, they automatically get that pass. It's going to be the top case status because it really is, the end game here, at least for now. If you're vaccinated, that really is kind of the last step, at least for our best practices. There's not going to be an expiry on this pass, and we'll talk about what that looks like if there were to be one, but there's not going to be an expiry for this pass, at least not for our recommendations. Furthermore, what I would say is I would recommend you turn this feature on regardless of really the COVID case numbers on or near your region. So I know that obviously COVID is a regional thing, and that in some places COVID is much lower. The numbers are very, very low, which is great news. And with vaccinations coming out, this is one of the reasons it's possible. But even with that, as an institution, I would likely, Ready's recommendation is you still turn this feature on so that you can track who's vaccinated on campus. This will allow you to be very quick to react if things change in the fall. For some reason, you at least have a good understanding of who's vaccinated, and you've built that into campus already from the workflow perspective. So it makes it a lot easier to react to things comes fall versus in fall realizing, hey, maybe there is an issue, maybe the cases are going up again, and we need to now scramble to figure things out. So definitely recommend you configure this regardless of whether or not the cases are high right now. You may not want to do other things. You may not want to daily screen or pre-check and other things, but you definitely want to cover your to have coverage on vaccinations. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to go off and jump into the campus cloud, and I'm going to show you what I would do or what our team would do to turn this on for you. So I'm going to go ahead and leave here. Give me a second. I've put my screen share on pause. All right. So the first thing, go ahead and share again. The first thing you'll want to do is you'll want to go ahead and create a case status for vaccinated. So you'll notice, and if you're interested, there is a product training on different case statuses and what you can do. You can always create new statuses and set colors and so on. In this case, we've created one called vaccinated. It's a status you can assign to a case. So if you're managing cases, you can go ahead and assign the vaccinated status to a case. And you can see that that it's assigned to a campus pass called the vaccinated campus pass. So that's the pass it's assigned to, and the name of the status is called vaccinated as well. And it's the status is a color blue, so we've just kept that to match with the color of the pass we're going to use. We've also added another status, the vaccination pending approval. Our best practice suggests that when a student were to submit their vaccination card, that what they should actually get as a case status is their pending approval, so that they shouldn't automatically say they're vaccinated because maybe they've uploaded something that is not a card or not valid, or maybe they just misunderstood. So the first thing they're really going to get assigned to is the vaccination pending approval, at which point an administrator can upgrade them and say, yes, I have confirmed, validate that, and now you are vaccinated indeed. And I'm going to show that in a moment. But those are the case statuses you're going to want to create: vaccination pending approval and vaccinated. You're going to want to put them here in the hierarchy over here in the ordering, right close to the top. They're not the top because if you are confirmed to have COVID, which we do know is possible, even if you're vaccinated, well, then this obviously is the most important piece, status, and that you are confirmed should be your top status. Other things like being exposed should definitely be below vaccinations, because if you were exposed but you're vaccinated, the high chance, likely the probability is very low that you are going to end up confirmed. So really, we don't want that to affect whether or not you're vaccinated. The idea here is that your case status can only go upwards from a user perspective and downwards from administration or administrator override. So as a user, I can fill in daily check-ins, let them know that I don't have any symptoms. That would give me a clear, right? If I get at some point exposed or I see I'm symptomatic, well, then that'll change my status. And then an admin can always downgrade me back to clear because time has passed, or because after a few questions, we realize, hey, you're actually clear. So at some point I can submit my vaccination card. That puts me in this status, where eventually I can get upgraded to vaccinated, or maybe gets rejected, at which point I go back to clear. I don't have COVID, but your vaccine didn't get approved, so you don't get to go to vaccinated. So I will show that next. But before I do, I wanted to show the campus passes here. So case statuses are related to case management. They are a status that you can put on an actual case. The pass is what the user will see on the mobile app when they want to show their pass. So they'll get a pass based on their status. Usually it's a one-to-one, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. So a given status has to link, a given status, like vaccinated, has to link to a campus pass. But you can have multiple statuses that link to the same campus pass. So you might have a campus pass saying, you can't come to campus, red, And that can be linked to from self-reported, from confirmed, maybe even if you're symptomatic. In this use case for today, we're talking about vaccinations. So we have a campus pass for vaccination pending approval, which is called the pass itself is also called vaccination pending approval. And you have one for vaccinated. So really you have one case each, and then you have one pass each, vaccination pending approval and vaccinated. If we go look at the vaccinated pass, the title is called vaccinated. And in there, there's a small message that says, thanks for submitting your vaccination card effectively, and like you're now set to go to campus. We've decided to choose that blue, and we've used the check mark, which is our recommendation on how you should configure this pass. The other thing is it's a clear type pass, so that this allows you to enter any buildings. Obviously, you're vaccinated. You should have pretty much unrestricted access to the entire campus. And furthermore, we said this pass does not expire. It's a non-expiring pass. That means that it doesn't expire every day. For those of you familiar with our platform, you know that some of our passes would expire every day. That way you have to kind of check in every day to make sure you still don't have symptoms, you're not likely to have COVID. But something like a vaccination does not require you to do anything daily because you're vaccinated. And so for that reason, we've toggled this off. Unlike, for example, your clear pass, which does expire daily. So yes, you can get a clear pass by saying I have no symptoms, but that only lasts a day. Every day you got to kind of recheck in and re-get a new pass so that you can come to campus every day. Again, there's obviously many flexibilities you can do here by toggling things on and off, playing around for your specific workflows. But for today, we're really saying this is what we think has worked for most of our customers. And this is the baseline where we want to start all our customers at. So that gives you the vaccinated pass as well as the vaccinated status. So now that we've built in this piece, we are now going to hop to seeing how would a user be able to get to this status. So if I go ahead here and I open up Manage, I've just opened it up in a new tab here, and I'm going to go over to my forms. So the way it would work here is that if I wanted to create this vaccination workflow, I would go create a form and I would choose the vaccination template. So we've already created a template for you. So all you need to do is click vaccination. You might want to call this the vaccination template or the vaccination form. Maybe you want to call it submit your vaccination card is the name of the form. It's the vaccination template, and you can go and click next. What that does is it gives you a set of questions that we think are likely to serve your purpose. Specifically, have you been vaccinated and by which manufacturer, with which manufacturer's vaccine, excuse me, and then please upload your vaccination card, which is a photo upload. So the user will go ahead and upload that image. The interesting part here really is that if they upload their image, then you want to set, and this is part of the best practices, you'll want to set a logic piece in this form to vaccination pending approval. What this means is that as a user goes through this form and says, yes, I have been vaccinated with, let's say, Pfizer 2 doses, and here's my vaccination card, it will tell them, thank you for submitting, and it'll automatically update their case status to vaccination pending approval. Again, you could make it directly go to vaccinated. So if somebody uploads their vaccination card, they automatically get vaccinated, they get that status and that pass, the blue pass. But our best practice recommends that you do this pending approval, and an admin would review these submissions, confirm they're legitimate, and then manually change them to be vaccinated, which is a one-time thing because right now we're only getting vaccinated one time. So in this case, I already have this form, so I won't save, but in this case, they would go to vaccination pending approval. And what would happen is once they've submitted that, you'd be able to go in your cases and you would be able to see here, for example, I did this earlier, that Dimitri submitted your vaccination. He was originally clear and he submitted his vaccination through this form, and that that escalated, or that basically automatically changed his status to vaccination pending approval. At which point I can click this vaccination. I can see the image. This was just the image of Mickey Mouse, but I can see the image in this case if it wasn't in fact a photo card, and then I can confirm, oh, indeed, that actually is a vaccination card. And on that, because of that, I want to go ahead and I want to set Dimitri's status to vaccinated. So in this case, I actually went ahead and I escalated that by myself in this case. So I'm an admin master. And I went and I said, yes, Dimitri is vaccinated. So at a high level, I created the various different statuses and campus passes. This is kind of like the infrastructure work I need to do. Once I've done that, I've created a form that links to those statuses so that a student can submit their card and automatically go into the right status. When they do that, as an admin, I would review, I would escalate and set their status accordingly based on the data they've uploaded. And thereafter, the student would have a vaccinated pass. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show that flow as a user. So if I go ahead here and I go here, I can go and look at the vaccination form here. So this is the vaccination form I was playing with earlier. I can click next. I can say, yes, indeed, I had a Pfizer 2-dose. I can go and take a picture. Again, I can here take a photo. I'll take one of my keyboard. So I've gone ahead and taken a picture. Let's assume that was a vaccination card. I can save and I can click next. This will now submit. And because I'm submitting my vaccination status, it will automatically set me to vaccination pending approval. Now, because I've already done this flow, I'm already vaccinated. So that's why you see a vaccinated pass here. At some point, assuming I was in pending, that would go to an admin. Like I said, the admin would change it manually by changing the case status, as I showed here. You can do that by editing a given user's status. They would be in pending approval, and you would move them to vaccinated based on their submission. When you do that on the mobile app, a user would go to the health and wellness section, click My Campus Pass, and see that they're vaccinated, so that you're able to, as a user now, show this pass to others to prove that you are vaccinated. It includes your student ID, it includes your name, includes the date, the current date, so it can't be screenshotted. It's a valid kind of daily updated values, and it includes the name of the pass as well as a description of the pass. In this case, since you're vaccinated, you may have some protocols suggesting you have free and unrestricted access to campus. Maybe you still want to have students wear masks. Maybe not, depending on your state and so on, and depending on the nuances per campus. But this is really where you might want to put some of that extra information. I'm going to take a quick pause here. I don't see any questions coming in through the chat or through the Q&A, but I would open it up to see if there are any questions from the group that they want me to hit here around implementing a vaccination workflow within the Ready platform. All right. I don't see anything coming through, so I'm going to go ahead and continue moving forward. The next item we want to look at, I guess maybe, I don't know if the participants wanted to just give a thumbs up. I don't know if you can do that through the Zoom webinar functionality, but maybe just throw in the chat if you're following along, maybe just say, thanks, following along. Just to give a sense of if everybody's feeling like this is more or less clear. Yeah. This recording, yes, Mike, this session is recorded. And in fact, in the next steps, I'll talk about a little bit later, not only will we send this along, but we will send documentation to go with it. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few moments towards the end of the webinar. But yes, this is recorded. And yes, there will be not only this recording and the slide deck I'm referring to here, but as well as a document itself that will give you all the information you require to run this yourselves or work with us to run it for you. Fantastic. All right, it's always a little interesting when you're working on a Zoom webinar because the audience participation is kind of limited. Thanks, Lai. That I just want to get a sense that everyone's following along. All right, so the next piece that we're going to talk about today, let me go ahead and present mode this, is routine testing. So you may have use cases where, despite, regardless of vaccination, you may want to routinely test students or staff faculty for COVID. One example is, in professional athlete world, they do this all the time. Most of the professional athletes, and not all of them, are vaccinated, but they still get tested because there's obviously a small chance. And given the importance of not having that spread across a team and taking them out of the running for something like the playoffs, if you're a hockey fan and you're watching hockey, that's really important. And so for that reason, there's something we built in called routine testing. On the institution space, outside of professional athletes, you might have an athletics team or research teams or various other teams that work very closely together and have high contact. And despite maybe everybody being vaccinated, or if maybe they're not vaccinated, you definitely want to run some type of routine testing to make sure that everyone is we're up to date on if there is any type of spread happening before it's too late. So if we did want to run this and we wanted to have people reminded that they need to be retested and kind of enforce that, we would do the following things. And I'm going to jump into the campus cloud to show this. So one of the things for routine testing is you'd actually create a campus pass called retest required. You can change the name, but the idea is that you would have to get retested for COVID-19. There'd be no expiry on this pass, similar to how we did the vaccination one. We recommend a 14-day testing window. This is obviously very subjective and set to policies. 14 days, more or less based on what we've seen with other customers where they're doing testing windows. 14-day, kind of 2 weeks is what they're thinking. But some have it as low as 7 days, and others have monthly testing. So really up to you there. And if you are doing this, you would create a separate vaccinated pass and status. And I'll explain why we would do this in a moment. And finally, you would create a results form where users or students could submit their results of their tests. So here's your pass, and then the way in which you show that you've been retested is by submitting your results, and then those results get updated manually. So what I'm going to do is go ahead again here. I'll escape from my slide deck, and I'll pop to the campus cloud. So what I've done here is, you'll notice the first thing is there is no case status that has to deal with retesting. So the concept of case state, the concept of being retested really doesn't impact case statuses. Pass restrictions is where you're going to want to come to set up routine testing. So one of the first things you're going to want to do is enable testing restrictions, which basically says that your campus pass, the one that the user has, will get reset if they don't have an updated test date in the last, again, configurable number of days. You can put this 21, you can put this to 7, and so on and so forth. Minimum, obviously, of 1 day, but it could be 7 days or 14. I'll go back, choose this 14 again. And then you'll say, what pass do you want to give students or users, app users, if they haven't done a test within 14 days? And in this case, we recommend you use something called retest required, which would be a pass you would create. I've gone ahead already and created this retest required pass. So I can say, hey, this is the title, it's retest required. It'll let them know that your last test was, in this case, more than 14 days ago. Please get retested and submit the testing form informing of your retest or your test results. In here, you can also include information on how to get retested or where testing centers are available. So again, this is configurable. You can change it and do as you see fit. We recommend you use the exclamation icon and that you set it in yellow. So unlike the vaccination pass, which was blue, we recommend this be yellow. And instead of being a check mark, which is generally all good, kind of a warning, which means you really do need to pay attention here. Now, in the pass type, you may want to decide that, hey, if a user has not been tested in a sufficient time in that window, they cannot access campus. So when they try and scan in to a QR code, it would actually say you are not allowed to get in. That's restricted. Instead, you may also say, hey, yes, they need to be retested, but overall, I'll still let them come to campus and I'll still let them access the building. So I'll still give them access, but I do want their pass to be yellow and not blue or something else. So I'm going to go ahead and save that so that now I have a clear pass, the test required, and the configuration is set that if in 14 days I haven't submitted test results, well then I will get that pass. Now, for a given user, if you want to see. So that's how the general premise works. For a given user, yes, I want to save whatever changes I had made here. So for a given user, let's again go to my test user. I go to the cases section. So in cases, I can go see here. We've added a section here called latest test date. This is when Dimitri, in this case, was tested last. I can go ahead and edit this, and I can change his last test date to whatever I want. So this is it's a manual admin managed field that can be changed at any time. I would change this field based on a submission of a form. So, you saw earlier, I submitted a form saying I have been vaccinated, and I included a test result, a vaccination result, which was a picture of my keyboard. In this scenario, I would submit a test result with a picture of my test results. That test result will usually be negative or positive. Let's assume it's negative. So I would submit my test results from the testing facility with, the picture of where it says, let's say, negative. In that case, a admin would see my submission and would say, Dimitri has submitted that he has been tested. Let's say he was tested on June 30th and it was negative. So the admin would take that form submission and come in and validate that that was indeed a valid submission of test results and go ahead and update my last test date. When I do this, I will have refreshed kind of my window of 14 days, and the student will then see again their campus pass related to their health status or their case status. So if they were vaccinated, they would see vaccinated. If they were clear, they would see the clear pass, whatever was there before. They will no longer see the retest required pass. They will see whatever was there before. So to quick recap of where we are so far in routine testing, the way it works is, I'll do that in this field here. On the health and wellness settings, for my campus settings, I have enabled pass restrictions. I have set the number of days and what pass they should see if the days elapse between their testing windows. And then I have created that pass here so that they have that information, and then they have the configuration I expect, the yellow kind of warning pass. For a given user, that shows up here in their latest test date, which is a manually updated field that the administrators manage based on the form submissions of test results. Just checking here if I missed anything I wanted to talk about. Create a campus pass, no expiry, set vaccine. Okay. So one thing is that if you were to set this up, you can set it. So specifically, you generally, from our experience working with customers, is that you generally would not want to set this up for everyone on campus. Generally speaking, if you are vaccinated, you do not need to be retested, unless you're on the athletics team, for example. That's what we've seen pretty commonly. In the case where you are part of one of these smaller groups, such as athletics, what you'll want to do there is actually create a new status for vaccinated athletics. And the reason why is because you may want them, despite being vaccinated, to always get retested. And if that's the case, then what you would set up a specific case status for athletes that are vaccinated. So I'll go ahead and do that one right now. Vaccinated athlete, let's say. So I may want to keep that more or less the same. Vaccinated athlete is still a blue pass. We'll assign it to, I'll assign it temporarily to the vaccinated pass and save. So now we have a vaccinated athlete. But we'll put that just below, we can leave that in the same place where you would have vaccinated. So you have vaccinated athlete. We'll also want to create a campus pass for that, which will be called vaccinated, part of the athletic program. Athletics, let's say. Again, that will be a blue pass. We might want to copy paste the same message, which was something along the lines of, thanks and enjoy campus. Again, we can add whatever information here, but idea is you have unrestricted access to campus. It's blue, and it gives you a clear. So that means you get unrestricted access. The big difference here, and this is what I'm going to emphasize, the big difference here is that we are going to make this expire every day. That is what allows you to do this retesting flow. If we don't expire it, then it's exactly like our other vaccinated pass, at which point, once you're vaccinated, you are clear and you're not going to have to be reminded about being retested. But if you did want the retesting flow, you would, for a specific group, you would enable the expiry of that pass, such as the athletics pass. That will now allow you, I got to select color, I can now save. So now I have a new pass, which is called vaccinated for athletics. Okay? And then the one thing here, you do need to update your status to map to the vaccinated athletics pass. So now I would be able to set a user status to vaccinated athlete, and they would get the vaccinated athletics campus pass, which would be very similar to the vaccinated pass, but it expires daily. And that expiration daily is what allows us to then remind them every 14 days, in this case, that they need to be retested. The reason why we split them is because most of the population on campus will likely just get the regular vaccinated status, at which point they're not going to have to be retested. And that's why they get the non-expiring pass, whereas athletes get an expiring pass because we want them to be retested, at whatever frequency. the way that looks for users, I'll go back to my test user. The way it would work is for cases, I would go choose Dimitri. Dimitri would have submitted a form saying, I have been vaccinated. You can do this in two ways. You can either set up a form specifically for athletes, so you already know who they are, or you can have one form for submissions, which is our recommendation, have one form for submissions of vaccination. And in that form, you can filter by audience. So let me just show you that quickly. I can go to forms, I can go to manage forms, I can go look at submit my vaccinations, I can go results, and I can choose here athletics. So I don't know if I have one here that's called athletics, but let's assume here Chaffee athletes. And in this case, I don't see any. There are no submissions of vaccines from athletes, but that's where you'd be able to see this information. Those users or students would get updated here, but when they would get updated, instead of using the vaccinated status, you would use vaccinated athlete status. And again, that gives them the daily pass that expires instead of giving that non-expiring pass. And this is what allows us to do the testing windows every, again, 14 days. I can go save that. So now I'm a vaccinated athlete, which is a status, and it's it is an expiring pass. Let me just go double check that I've covered all of the things I wanted to talk about. And I do see a chat. Okay, so Michael, how can we handle, so there's a question, it says, how can we handle vaccine submissions for non-app users? Is there capability of web form with attachments? The short answer is yes, and we will make available information on how you would do this with web forms. But yes, the idea is that all forms, and I'll show this quickly, all forms here can be shared. So this is the vaccine form. So let's assume in this specific case, I want to roll out vaccination across my campus. I want anybody to submit, not only just app users. App users would be able to access that through Studio. They create a tile, we create a tile in Studio so that it's available on the app like I showed earlier, which let me just show that really quickly. Here, you can see the various tiles, and one of the tiles here is vaccination form. So that's one way that a user can access this form. The other way would be direct link. So you see there's a direct link, I click share, it copied it to my clipboard. I'm gonna go paste it here, and boom, I can enter my email, or I can scan a QR code, which will take me to the app, which will open the app and start the form. So I can either go again from this URL to the app if I had it. Otherwise, I could type in my email at readyeducation.com. And I can continue, and I can go and complete the form. Same form, I can go ahead, I can choose a file to upload and so on. So yes, you can do that directly through here. That information would show up again in the same case management and form selection as you usually see. All things are all the same afterwards. Go ahead, I do see another question. Regarding the vaccination question, adding a blue pass. If we want to add a general question to our existing questionnaire and keep only the green pass, can we pull a report to query by question to determine who has been vaccinated? Good question. So if we wanted to just keep the green pass and keep that clear pass that we're using, and we wanted to do that by pulling a report per question. So yes, you can pull a report per question, right? You can always come to results, and then you can see all responses. So this is the results of a given form. So a form, when you go to the form builder, has a results section, right? So you have a welcome section, you have a question section, which is the questions you're going to ask, and you have a results section, which are the results that you can get. In this case, for vaccines, you can either get a result that says fully vaccinated or a result that says not vaccinated. And therefore, based on that, you can see in your results section the two results that you can have: fully, which in this case is both, or not vaccinated. If you're looking for a specific question, you can see here, you can filter by question. So in this case, there's only two questions, but you could have and you can see these are the pictures that have been uploaded, and these are the answers. Both candidates here, both users here had Pfizer 2 doses. You can also download all this data so that you can do anything you want on Excel and kind of filter and do macros there. So yes, you can filter for questions or results. So there are different ways you can slice and dice the form data, which will allow you to do that. The one key piece though that I need to mention here is that because your form has already been published, you would in theory have to create the identical form, but again, and republish that form. So you can't update a form that's already been published. So you need to just create a new form. Could be exactly same form, exact same logic, but it is a new form that you would go ahead and create. And then you can add that extra question while you're copying over the current form. All right, I'm just looking at the questions here. Feel free to shoot in a few more questions as we're going through. All right, I do see another question coming in. Thank you. My pleasure, Marissa. All right. That is, in a nutshell, routine testing. That gives you a really good ability to test or routinely test a group of users. In this case, I showed the example around vaccination, around athletes. All right. I will jump back into more demos in a bit, potentially, depending on the questions, but I do want to keep moving forward. One of the things I want to talk about is our contact trace help. So, you know, what are the next steps? What does it look like? And how can I get help on this? So number one, we do have a best practices doc that I showed a bit earlier. We are going to be socializing that doc next week. It's going to cover much of what I talked about today in written form with screenshots. So if any of this was confusing or overwhelming, there is actually going to be a written doc that's going to accompany this webinar so that you can watch the webinar again, share the webinar, as well as look at the doc and read the doc and kind of get info and copy paste things from the doc itself. We call it best practices, but it's effectively tell me what to do. We also have support articles, which is really where I can learn more about what is possible. These are support articles that are that cover all the various functionality related to contact trace, some of which you can use specifically in the use cases I talked about today. So support articles really gives you everything that the functionality that's possible in functionality. And again, best practices tells you how to use specific parts of that to apply it in this scenario to achieve these kind of key use cases. And finally, you may think that, hey, this is all great. We do want to do all of these things, but everything Dimitri spoke about was a little confusing and I'm not really sure where to start, or I don't have time, or I would just love for you guys to be able to help me out. And that's where activation form is going to come in. It's a form where you effectively indicate for us to build this out for you based on the best practices. There's a set of questions in this activation form, which will ask you some basics, like, do you want to activate vaccination? Do you want to activate routine testing? What is your routine testing window? Some other questions along those lines. And you'll fill that form in and that'll tell our team, yes, I would like to have this activated. And these are some information that you will require. With that being said, then what are specifically the next steps? Well, you know, the next step really is going to be check Teamwork. Teamwork is our project management software. For those of you who are familiar already, you know where this is. For those of you who are not, feel free to reach out to your closest contact or, when in doubt, support. To ask questions. But in Teamwork, our project management software, we are going to post a recap of today's webinar early next week. So today's Friday, likely on Tuesday or sometime Tuesday, we'll be posting a recap. It's going to include the recording to today's webinar, the link to the best practices document, and a link to the activation form. You have then two options. You can watch the recording, read the docs, and do it yourself. Click the various buttons I clicked today, kind of follow along and really just do it yourself. That's totally a fair option. Some of our customers many of our customers opt to do that. On the flip side, you can do option 2, which is you can fill in the CT Plus activation form that I talked about, and we will then do some of this or most of this work for you. And then you can review the app once it's ready and update it. And then we've updated the content. And then on either case, whether you do it yourself or we do it for you after you've reviewed it, you can then go ahead and launch and keep students, staff, faculty, and all campus constituents safer. That kind of opens it up again for questions. So I'm going to open up for questions, see if anybody has anything. If not, we'll do a quick recap and close up for today. So I don't see much coming in right now, just not terrible. It either means this was really great and you've learned a lot and you understand what to do and you're ready to do it, or you've understood nothing, at which point the recording will be very useful. And hopefully on the second or third time you pick it up. Or if not, please send feedback on how we can make these more useful for you so that you're able to pick this up while watching. With that being said, kind of as a quick recap for today's session, we really want to cover vaccination and routine testing. This is a very specific application of our functionality in this specific use cases. We covered both of these use cases. We jumped into the campus cloud and showed exactly how to do some of these things, from setting up the settings to setting up the forms to what it would look like for users and some of the nuances around routine testing. And then I also talked to you a little bit about how you can kind of follow up and get the right information you need to do this yourself, or let us know to help you do it for you. One thing, and I see a couple of questions coming in, but one thing before I jump to those, there is the health and wellness dashboard under insights. And this is a really interesting place with vaccination and vaccination pending. You're actually able to see your progress on vaccinating your campus. So this is an interesting dashboard that you may want to show to things like the board of directors or general campus safety to say, hey, our campus is X amount, vaccinated, or these are how many students or staff that are vaccinated. Again, you can see this based on audiences. So you can do staff, faculty, student, and so on and so forth. And you can set the time limit as well. Let's say here for the last 90 days, you can kind of see what was happening here and get a good sense of the numbers. These are test data, so obviously there's not a whole lot here to show, but it gives you a good sense of the numbers, and that you can see here for vaccinations and even pending. So you can get a sense of your backlog of what you need to review versus how many people are actually vaccinated on campus. All right, so the questions mostly that came in here were just thank yous, so I appreciate that. It's our pleasure to be able to talk a little bit about this functionality and driving some of these key use cases. All right, so here you'll have some various other data that you may want to look at and track again through for those statuses. But I won't dig too much into that. This part has been covered, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to jump into them. But otherwise, the key thing really is that by adding these new statuses, you're able to now view dashboards on them, which could be really interesting for socializing this type of data, like how many students, staff, faculty on campus are actually vaccinated. All right. I'm going to do a last quick check here, make sure I didn't miss anything that I really wanted to talk to you about today. Does not appear so. If there isn't anything else, I will share my last screen here, which is if there are any questions, but I think we're good for today. I really appreciate everybody coming by. Like I said, recordings, look out for us on Teamwork. That's where you'll see us next. It's been a pleasure to speak to you on this Friday afternoon. If you're headed off on July 4th weekend, have a safe and happy 4th of July. It actually happens to be my birthday. I'm born on the 4th of July. So I will be celebrating my birthday along with the US. For everybody else, have a great weekend, and I look forward to speaking to you again, either through Teamwork, or on our next webinar series. Thanks, and have a great day.